What's up, guys? Eric Vasquez here from teachmetodesign.com. And last week, in our first episode of the Adobe Illustrator Basics video series, I walked you through some very basic stuff, such as how to create a new document, using artboards to help arrange the workspace, differences between RGB and CMYK, and also how to work with basic shapes in Illustrator. Now today, in part 2, we're going to be building on that, and I'm going to be showing you guys how to use and become familiar with the pen tool, which is crucial to understand if you want to do any type of illustration or vector-based work. So I'll be giving you some tips and shortcuts on how to use that, and we'll also be taking a look at using things like gradients and blending modes, and also the Pathfinder, which is another very important tool in Adobe Illustrator. So let's jump right into part 2. So I've got a file here already open. It's basically just a blank canvas that I used in my first lesson. And what I want to do today is show you guys the pen tool. So press P on the keyboard or just come over here and select your pen tool. And basically, the pen tool is super important in Illustrator. It allows you to, create curves, Bezier curves, or any kind of custom shape that you want. But what it's really useful for is if you are tracing something. So if I had, a photo or a drawing or an illustration, kind of like what I did in my my mascot logo design a couple weeks ago, I basically scanned a drawing in to Photoshop, fixed it up a little bit, and then traced it in Illustrator to make a logo. So that's one instance where, Illustrator is great because I can resize that artwork as large or as small as I want. And that's one of the major benefits of working in a vector-based program like Adobe Illustrator. I'm just going to start off with my pen tool, create kind of a random looking shape here. And the idea is that as I add points, I'm just clicking and I'm not letting go of the mouse. I'm holding it down and I'm just dragging this around, and you can see what it's doing. It's basically changing the curves here using these anchor points. Now, if I were to add another point onto this, it's going to look a little bit crazy, but if I want to see what I'm doing a little bit easier, I'm just going to change this from a black fill color to a stroke. So I showed you guys last time how to do that. Just hold down the Shift key and press X on the keyboard, or you can come down here and just click this black arrow to swap the fill and stroke. Alright, so for now I just want this black line so I can see what's going on. Now, whenever you're working with the pen tool, again, you'll have these handles that allow you to click and drag using your direct selection tool, which is A on the keyboard. But you can drag these handles to modify your curves or your points. Now, at any point in time, if you grab your pen tool, hold it down, you'll see you have these options. You can add points, delete anchor points, or convert anchor points. Now, if I wanted to add a point, I could basically click anywhere on my path and just click. And now it's added a new point with 2 new handles so that I can, really get even more detailed and specific with how I want to manipulate those points. All right, but if I decide I don't really want that, sure, I can cut it, or I can use the remove anchor point option there with my pen tool. Now, if I just go back to my default pen tool, I can click on the last point that I made, and that will get rid of that handle. So, if I were to just click, if I click this point, now I can just drag this wherever I want. Now, if I didn't do that, this handle right here is going to basically influence the direction and the length of my subsequent or next point that I make, right? So if I click somewhere over here, you'll see the shape is kind of going up and then curving. But if I just click here first, I can pretty much tell it to go wherever I want it to. Okay, so that's kind of the benefit of doing that. Also, if I hold down the Alt Option key, you'll see that it kind of toggles between my pen tool and this option that lets me basically dictate the direction or length of this handle. And this actually works the same way in Photoshop. You can do this to say, maybe I want the line to be longer all the way up here to influence the next point. Or, you can just make it be really short, right? And then I click over here, oops, and I can just continue drawing. So, you know, just try to experiment with the handles. Let's say, again, I want to drag this in here so it's shorter. You can do that. Or if I hold down Alt Option and drag the handle all the way down here, basically my next line is now going to follow that handle. Alright, so it's kind of telling me which direction and how far I want it to go. But if I want to have complete control over that, I'm just going to click on this point before I create my next shape here, my next point. Okay, so I don't know what the hell I'm drawing right now, but this is basically like just a random organic shape. I'm just showing you guys the pen tool so that you can hopefully begin to get comfortable with it, because it is such a huge part of working in Illustrator. Right, so again, just click and drag to make each point. You can use Shift and X to basically toggle between a fill color and a stroke. And I'm just going to delete that. Well, actually no, let's keep it for now just so we can do something else here. So let's say you have a shape and you want to build on it, right? Not that I have any idea what this is. It could be some kind of weird tree table or something like that. But if I wanted to add a shape inside of this, or even combine another shape with it, how would I do that? Well, we could do what we did last time and use the Shape Builder tool, right? If I create this shape, close the shape, and now let's say I want to move this around here, something like that, or over here. Again, I can move my cursor over one of the four corners and just rotate it. All right, let's say we had something like this going on. And I wanted to merge these two shapes together. Well, I can hold down the Shift key, select my first shape, and then the second shape, and come back to my Shape Builder tool, click and drag to join those two together. But another way that I could do this is to use what is called the Pathfinder. Now, the Pathfinder in Illustrator is incredibly useful. You can use it to combine shapes, knock shapes out of each other, and kind of like subtract shapes from each other. But you can get to it coming up to the window menu and choosing Pathfinder, which I already have. So if you just look over in your toolbar here, you can see that we have the Pathfinder tool. It basically looks like these two squares overlapping. So I'm just going to click and drag that over here. And that's kind of a handy thing too. You can remove some of these tools from your toolbar menu just by clicking and dragging them. And you can open it up. And then if I click on that, you'll see that I've got a whole bunch of options here. You've got shape modes, which allow you to unite. You can also, you've also got a few others here called minus front, intersect, exclude, and then you've got these other options as well. So let's take a look at some of these. All right, if I have my shape here that I want to keep, I'm just going to make a copy of it so that I don't mess it up. And again, if you'll remember from last time, I can just hold down the Alt key and click and drag to create a copy of the shape. And I just want to save that off to the side for the next part. But let's say I want to join these two. I'm just going to click and drag around them and click on my first option here called Unite. And that's basically going to do the same thing as the Shape Builder tool. All right, so now that kind of merges everything into one shape. But let's say I had this other shape off to the side here, create a copy of it, select my main shape, and now what happens if I choose minus front? Well, it's basically going to knock that shape out of my other shape. All right, so it kind of just, took this part that's overlapping and subtracted it from that shape. So it's a really good way to kind of add on to or build onto your shapes is by using the Pathfinder, right? So I'm creating a shape here that I want to cut out of my main shape. So click here, hold down Shift and select your main shape, and then again we're going to minus front. So that's a kind of a handy way to modify an existing shape that you have in Illustrator to either add onto it or remove a piece from it. Okay, if I make another copy of this over here, now let's take a look at our third option, to intersect. It's basically going to remove everything except these two, this area where the two shapes overlap, right? So that's pretty self-explanatory. And then you've got this exclude option, which just knocks the piece that overlaps out of everything else. Okay, so Again, if you just want to keep the piece that's overlapping, or if you want everything but that, you would use either the exclude or the intersect options. Now, as far as these other ones go, sometimes they can be a little bit unpredictable. Sometimes they don't really produce any results at all. But the one that I tend to use the most is merge. And I use that a lot for logos. Let's say you have a bunch of shapes overlapping, and you want to select all the shapes that are the same color in your document. Well, you would select everything and then merge them together. And you might not be able to really see what I'm talking about right now in this example, but as we do some more advanced stuff, I will show you guys how that works. So now that we've got this funky balloon animal looking thing, I'm just going to merge these shapes together, unite them using the Pathfinder once again. So that's a little bit of an overview on how to use the pen tool as well as the Pathfinder. Now I'm going to select this shape, and I want to add some shapes on top of it. So I'm going to select it, and then I want to lock this so that I can't modify it. So one way I could do that is to come up to the Object menu and choose Lock Selection. But you'll see as I do that, it also shows me the keyboard shortcut, which is just Command 2, or Control 2, I think, if you're on a PC. Alright, and once it's locked, you can just come back up and do Unlock All, or press Command Option 2. Okay, so lock, and now I'm going to grab my pen tool again, and this time I'm going to select a solid white, but if I just want to get back to my default colors, I can press D on the keyboard, just like in Photoshop, and you'll see now I have a white fill with a black stroke. So if I tap X, it's going to toggle between my fill and stroke colors, and I'm going to select none for the stroke. Okay, and then I'm going to press Shift and X to have white for the stroke. Now all I'm going to do is kind of follow the inside of this shape here a little bit. I clicked and dragged to create that first point. Then I'm going to click and drag again to continue this shape. Click on that last anchor point, drag until it kind of lines up. Then I'm going to come all the way down here, click and drag until I can get that curve to follow the shape as closely as I can. Alright, now I'm going to click on this last anchor point here, and I'm going to bring the shape back up. Okay, so I'm just clicking and dragging, trying to get that to follow as closely as I can. And as I showed you before, right now we have this handle that comes over here. So if I try to close or continue to follow this shape here, you'll see it's all the way out here, which we don't want. It's kind of messing up our curve. So instead what I'm going to do is click on that point and then click and drag on the inside here. Alright, I'm going to do the same thing, click there, click and drag, and then come up to the very first point that we created and close the shape. Okay? And now that I've created the shape, I left it as an outline so that I could see what I was doing. But once the shape is closed, I can press Shift and X to make it a fill color. Okay, so now we've got this white shape inside of our main black shape. And we can continue to do that if we just wanted to say add highlights to something, or add shadows, or even just some random organic shapes. It doesn't really matter, but this is kind of one way that you could do that. Okay, so I'm just going to add a few more of these really quick so that I can show you guys something. Alright, let's say I want to modify this curve here that I just made. Well, I can hold down Alt, come to my handle, and just click and drag that until I get it nice and lined up. Then I'm going to click on my last point and just continue moving the shape. And again, if you get messed up by seeing this as a fill color instead of an outline, just press Shift and X, and that'll bring you right back to a stroke. Then close it when you're done. Alright, so now let's say you have these 4 white shapes, okay? They're 4 separate shapes. They're not touching or intersecting in any way. And we have our black shape in the back, which is still locked. Okay, but I'm going to unlock it. Again, Command Option 2. And now I've got my black shape in the background and these 4 white shapes. Okay, so let me show you guys how the merge option works that I was trying to show you before. If I select all, which you can do just by pressing Command or Control A, it's the same thing as basically clicking and dragging over everything. So Command A, select all, or you can come up here to the Select menu and choose Select All, and it'll show you the shortcut for that as well. Okay, so select all, and now if I do merge from my Pathfinder, it's basically merged all of these together into one shape. Now why is that useful? Well, first of all, you could basically group things like this, but I could also have done that by pressing Command G to group things, but this is where it gets to be a little bit more useful. Let's say I had all of these white shapes and I wanted to knock them out, or basically change the color of them. What I can do is press A to get my direct selection tool, click on this white shape here, and then I can come up to the Select menu and choose Same Fill Color. Okay, so you can select everything that has the same color, the same opacity, the same color, weight. You can select things all together simultaneously. So I'm going to choose Select Same Fill Color, and that's now selected everything that's white that we just merged in our shape. Now I didn't have to merge the shape to do that, but I would have had to select each piece individually while holding down the Shift key to get them all selected together. But now that I've done that, I can just come in here, change the color, get rid of the stroke here. I can just change the fill color for all of that. Okay? But if I try to change the color while this whole thing is selected, it's just going to make everything the same color because we merged it. So if I back up here, before I merge these shapes together, I'll show you guys one more time. So now if I didn't merge this and I just went up to Select Same Fill Color, I could change the color of all of those together, but I have to have them all selected first. But basically when you're getting ready to output something, say for printing, you want to have everything merged just so you can get rid of it really quickly and easily. Another way that is useful is, let's move it over here so you can see. If I select this shape with my direct selection tool and press delete, well, now I've just knocked those areas out of our main shape. So by merging it, it's basically flattening all of the overlapping shapes together into one shape. Alright, so hopefully that kind of makes sense and you guys can see where that might be kind of useful. Alright, so that's the basics of using the pen tool along with the Pathfinder, overlapping some shapes, and also the ability to select things that are the same color. So let me just try this one other thing here. I'm going to create a couple of shapes, make it different colors, make an outline, something like this, okay? Make a copy of that. Actually, let's make a square over here. Okay, so if I select my blue square and came up to the Select Same Fill Color, now I would have both of these blue shapes selected. Okay, so I can manipulate everything in my document that has the same fill color, or I can manipulate everything that has the same stroke color or stroke weight. Alright, if these were two different colors but the same weight, that is when I would want to say select same stroke weight, right? Because these two are obviously not the same color, the purple and the green. However, they do have the same thickness for the stroke. Okay, but if they were the same color, then I would just say select same stroke color. Okay, so how else could I select all of the shapes that are the same or the same color? Well, I could use my magic wand tool in Adobe Illustrator, which is just under my direct selection tool. So if I select that or press Y on the keyboard, I can basically just click on one of these blue shapes and it will select everything that is the same color. Okay, so I can do that with the green as well, and you'll see that it's selected both of my green shapes. Right, so it works in a very similar way. And that's one of the key takeaways, is that whether you're using Photoshop or you're using Illustrator, there's always a bunch of different ways to usually achieve the same thing. So it's just a matter of trying to familiarize yourself with as many of these different options as possible, just so you know what you have available to you. Okay, so let's take a look at some of these other options that we have. Let's say we wanted to make this a gradient fill instead of a solid color. Well, if you come down here, click on your fill color, you can click on this middle option here at the very bottom, which will give you a gradient. And you'll also see in your toolbar over here you have this gradient box. Now from here you can either choose a linear gradient, a radial gradient, and you also have the ability to reverse the gradient. So if I wanted it to go the other way, I can just do that. Alright, or you can set a specific angle. If you want it to be 45 degrees or 135 degrees, you can type that in manually that way too. Now if I wanted to put some color in here, well, there's a few ways that I could do that. I basically would want to come back to my gradient option over here, and I can double click on this white color here at the bottom, and you can use this slider to keep it grayscale. But what if I wanted color? Well, I can choose from my swatches, and I can pick any colors that I want from here, or you can click on the color and you basically have your RGB sliders, and that will allow you to modify the colors that way as well. Alright, so again, if I want my swatches, or I can put in a specific RGB value or a hexadecimal value on the bottom. Alright, so that's a quick way to kind of get my change the fill from a solid color to a gradient. Now I'm curious, if I were to use my magic wand tool and now I click on the circle, it's not going to select my blue box because now it's a blue gradient and not a blue fill. Alright, but it'll still work the same for anything else that has the same stroke. Okay, so I can, let's say I want to add a gradient, or I want to copy the same gradient that I have in my circle over here. Well, I could just come back over here and click on my gradient fill from the bottom, or another way that I could do it is to press I on the keyboard, and that will give me my eyedropper tool, which will allow me to just click and sample so that I have the gradient. Right? I can click and sample the gradient from here, I can sample from the box, I can sample from our main shape, pretty much anywhere you want. It's basically just sampling a color picker. Again, very similar to Photoshop, but it will quickly and easily allow me to apply that same gradient to multiple shapes in the same document. So there's a few different options that you can use here for this whenever you're working with the pen tool or shapes. Let's say I wanted to add this gradient to my main shape. I'm just going to use a color picker. And you can really add as many of these colors as you want. So if I wanted to add a third, fourth, or fifth color, I can just click just below the gradient box here, and it'll allow me to add another color. Alright, so let's say I add like a pink color, make it more saturated, something like that. Alright, I can play with the positioning of it just by sliding it around here. Or if I want this to be the end color, I'm simply just going to click and drag this other darker blue towards the middle. Now let's say I just actually wanted a basic black to white gradient. I'm just going to set black as my end color, set white as the middle color, and I can remove colors from a gradient just by clicking and dragging down. And now I'm just using black and white, and let's say I want the white to actually fade out to transparent. So let me show you. I'm going to select my circle, make it a little bit bigger, and to do that I'm just clicking over the corner, holding down the Alt and Shift keys and making this larger from the middle. If I just hold down Shift and drag out, it's going to make it larger basically from the bottom left to the upper right. But if I hold down Alt and Shift, it's going to expand it from the center. Okay, so I've made my circle larger, and I want it to go behind my main shape. So I'm going to come up to the Object menu and choose Arrange, Send to Back. And now this way you'll be able to see the transparency in our main shape here. So I'm going to select the shape, come back to my gradient, click on the white, and this time I'm going to change the opacity from 100 to 0. And now you can see how you have a gradient that fades from solid to transparent, and it allows you to see the shape below. Okay, so if I did just want it to be a solid white, I'd leave the opacity at 100, but instead if I want it to be opaque, then I'm just going to choose 0 or any other number here. You don't have to go by multiples of 10. You could put in 15, 27, doesn't really matter. Okay, just know that that option is available to you. Okay, and if I want to bring the circle to the front, I'm going to press Command Shift and the right bracket, and that is the shortcut to bring this shape all the way to the front. And I can do the same thing with this. I can make the entire shape opaque as well, just by coming to the transparency and lowering the opacity of the entire shape. Or I can do what I just did before and just change the opacity of one of the colors in my gradient. Okay, so there's a few useful things there that you guys can experiment with. If I come back here to the transparency tab, again, I can change the opacity of the entire shape, but I can also change the blending mode. So just like in Photoshop, you've got multiply, color burn. All of these things should look very similar to you if you've used Photoshop. You can use overlay, soft light, and kind of see how these blending modes affect the shapes, how they interact with each other. Right? If I have that one on soft light, this one on exclusion, overlapping, you can see how you can create some very interesting results very quickly. Okay, so there's just a couple of things that I wanted to show you guys to build on what we did last week by, creating some shapes, using the pen tool, showing you how the Pathfinder works, as well as gradients, transparency, and blending modes. So I know seems like we're covering a lot, in each of these, but I want to cover a good amount of information in each of these lessons so that I can help you guys get up to speed with Illustrator. So hope that you're enjoying the series so far. This is episode 2 of our Illustrator Basics video series. If you did like the video, please give us a thumbs up, comment, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. And be sure to sign up for the email list, guys, and be the first to know anytime some new content drops. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for your support, and we'll see you next time.